If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high-quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Good morning from Evo. Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now part of the Beeson Family of Podcasts. We've got an excellent podcast for you. As joining me in segment number 2, we're going to have Tristan Freeman aboard. He does amazing work over at Bustin' Brackets. We had to record that interview before all of the Sweet 16 games were final, but we're going to be taking a look at what we've all got on Friday in the Sweet 16 and give you guys just a little bit of what we've been seeing in the offseason as well. We're going to be much more in off-season mode when we sort of have the holdover for the Final Four, and then obviously once the season is done. This is a podcast that does not shut down. We are going to be doing a podcast every single day throughout the offseason as well. We're going to be taking a look there, but going to be getting his thoughts on a few of these coaching moves that we have been seeing, and we're going to get his thoughts in general on these tremendous games that we're going to be getting for Friday. And in the final segment, going to give you guys picks and analysis on all 4 Sweet 16 games as we hit some bank shots. If you do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at unit_D1. Keep in mind, letters EM, they mean does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. Did not get in any Twitter /X questions today, but we had a fun day in the Sweet 16 on Thursday. Let's take a look back at it, try to find some trends, and try to get to know these teams a little bit better.
Games from yesterday is Greg buzzing about. Here is the rowdy recap.
Well, Iowa State busted up my 5-0-1 DK Network write-up run. Still been a relatively solid season on these, but Iowa State at no point in this game led against Illinois. Now, things got wobbly late for Illinois, to say the least, but they get the job done by kind of 72-69. Terrence Shannon, he was the best player out there on the floor in this game. He had 29 points. Threw in their 5 boards, went 4 of 10 from 3, but Illinois probably should have won this game by more. They go 15 of 29 at the free throw line. Iowa State, 17 of 21 at the charity stripe. And Iowa State, they do go 6 of 13 from 3. They just couldn't do anything inside the arc. They shot less than 38% on their 2-point shots, and it was all about keeping up with the Jones and Curtis Jones. He had 26 points off the bench for Iowa State, and that was the issue because you had Sean Gilbert, Tamon Lipsby only be able to give you a combined 22 points in this one. You just needed a little bit more out of these 2 guys for Iowa State. They win the turnover battle 12-9. They didn't do a ton with those turnovers, and Illinois, they win the rebound battle by a count of 41-37. So Illinois is on to the Elite 8, and they're going to be facing off against UConn, who, I mean, my goodness gracious, talk about a pulverization. You saw UConn absolutely decimate San Diego State 82-52. UConn now 9-0 straight up and against the spread the last 2 NCAA tournaments, and they've won every single NCAA tournament game that they've played last 2 seasons by 13 plus points. By the way, getting back to Illinois, that was just a 5th under that Illinois played in their game against Iowa State in their last 27. They have been very, very profitable to the over, and I mean, just with this UConn team in general, they've been one of your most profitable teams in all of college basketball. The San Diego State team did not stand a single chance, and I was stupid enough to take the points from San Diego State, and I feel like a moron as they went 5 of 22 from 3-point range. UConn 10 of 26 from distance, and for Stephon Castle, very good game in this one for him. 16 points, 11 boards. He gets lost with what we see out of Donovan Clingan, Cam Spencer, Tristan Newton, and Newton and Spencer, by the way, combined 35 points in this one. San Diego State loses the turnover battle 12-11. They get pounded on the glass 50-29. Jaden Ledee was able to throw in their 18 points, but that's about all you had. And for UConn, they are now 25-12 against the spread. And how about Clemson? As underdogs, they win outright against Arizona, an Arizona team that was quite profitable for you all season long. But now Clemson, 2014-1 against the spread. They get the job done against Arizona, 77-72. Now, I will say, for Clemson, they got some bounces to go their way, to say the least, but they also had the whistle go against them, as Arizona got quite a few calls in this one. But for Arizona, 5 of 28 from 3-point range. Caleb Love, 13 points on 18 shots. Umar Ballo had 15 points, 15 rebounds. He did a solid job there as Arizona won the battle on the glass, 44-36, but for Clemson, the man that was able to help them unlock a little bit of everything. How about Cameron Hunter? 18 points, 7 boards, 5 assists. He was tremendous. PJ Hall was able to give you 8 boards, 17 points in this one for Clemson. They go 8 of 25 from 3-point range. And Joe Girard, by the way, went 1 of 3 at the free throw line. Joe Girard has been one of the best free throw shooters in all of college basketball. So that was a little bit of an oddity, but Clemson, they really feel like they're reaching that form that they had towards the beginning part of the season. They are now on to the Elite Eight, and they're going to be facing off against Alabama, a team that they knocked off on the road earlier in the season as Alabama. They put together a nice rally to take down North Carolina. This by kind of 89-87. Looked like North Carolina, when they got up 8 at the half, they were going to run and hide with this game, and things did slow down a little bit more in the second half as Alabama, yet another over for them. Talk about an overwhelming team. 26 overs to 9 unders in their games thus far this season, but for North Carolina, they go 12 of 32 from 3-point range. Cormac Ryan was able to supply the team with 17 points, and North Carolina won the battle on the glass, 46-43. Here was the problem, though. Alabama had a guy by the name of Grant Nelson give them 5 blocks, 24 points, 12 rebounds, and for Alabama, 11 of 26 from 3-point range out of them. You had Nelson also go 10 of 13 at the free throw line, and Aaron Action Estrada, Rylan Griffin. They both had 19 points apiece in this one as well. So it was a great day of college basketball action on Thursday. And if you're looking trend-wise at what we're all getting in college basketball over the last 7 days, this includes all the tournaments that we've been seeing, NCAA tournament, NIT, what have you. Favorites just continue to reign supreme. 36-29 against the spread. Meanwhile, the unders, they have just a little bit of an edge on the overs. 33 unders, 32 overs, and overall for the season, the over has been hitting right around about 50.9%. We saw 3 unders and 1 over in the Sweet 16 games from yesterday, and we did see the favorites go just 1-3 against the spread. The lone favorite to be able to cover, that would be UConn, but overall for the season, favorites hitting at a 50.7%. So that's what we're seeing right now in college basketball, and that's what we all got in the Sweet 16 yesterday. Now let's take a look at what we're going to be getting for the Friday Sweet 16 games and some of the coaching hires that we've seen over the last few days. We're going to be joined by Tristan Freeman of Bustin' Brackets for that next, right here on Cusco Soups with myself, Craig Peterson, now a part of the Beast Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Soups with myself, Craig Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast, and it is always great to be joined by this man as Tristan Freeman does such excellent work, taking a look at the great game that we all know and love of college basketball. He's over there at Bustin' Brackets doing an amazing job all 12 months out of the year as we are obviously getting set for the Sweet 16 games that are going down on Friday, but I know that he, along with taking a look at all this great live action, is doing an amazing job taking a look at the billion names of the transfer portal, these coaching moves, and so much more. And you're able to follow my Twitter /X at Oops351 all together. And Tristan, it's always a pleasure, my friend. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Tristan. And Tristan, we'll take a look at some of these coaching moves, what have you, that we've seen. But on top of mind has to be the Sweet 16 games that we're going to be seeing on Friday. We're going to be getting 4 absolutely exceptional ones. And just what do you make out of these 4 games that we do have for Friday? Because I just take a look at all 4 games, and I wouldn't be surprised if any of these 4 teams win/lose their games. And I do think that we're going to have a lot of tempo wars in these 4 games as well.
Yeah, you have 4 matchups, and obviously considering what happened the first weekend, they're all compelling in their own right. But each of them have their own very unique storylines. You have a lot of coaches among these 8 that have had some questions about them when it comes to whether or not they can make deep runs in March. And all of them now have great paths to the Final Four. You look at the Midwest region, obviously Purdue is the number 1 seed. They've got past the first weekend. But now they have the toughest teams left. They faced, Gonzaga and Tennessee before in the Valley Invitational. But Gonzaga is a much different team than they saw at the very beginning of the season. And they're going to have to find a way to deal with the offense that's now one of the best in the country and have seemed to find themselves on track. We'll see how Graham Ike can handle Zach Edey and whether or not Gonzaga can avoid foul trouble, but that's going to be something. And then Duke and Houston. Duke has the talent of a 1 seed, even though they've had the consistency of a 4 or 5 seed this season. If Jared McCain can, find a way to be the best guard on the floor, which is going to be hard because Jamal Shedd has been absolutely fantastic this year and in the tournament, then Duke has a great shot at pulling off the upset. And then, Creighton and Tennessee, 2 teams and 2 coaches looking to make that Final Four run in their respective programs. Both teams are in win-now mode because of how many, seniors they have. I'm very curious because I think outside of Marquette being the clear favorite over NC State, the other three absolutely can go one way or the other.
Yep, I think that this is going to be just a really fun Sweet 16, and I do want to lead it off with this matchup with Creighton versus Tennessee, because with Tennessee, the age-old questions have been popping up with Rick Barnes in the NCAA tournament. He's really done everything else in the sport other than win on the biggest stage. Meanwhile, you've got a Creighton team that, if they're hitting threes, are as dangerous as anyone in all of college basketball, but out of all the teams remaining, I think they might be the highest variance team. How do you take a look at this matchup? Because the one thing that I do think Tennessee has going for them is, even if they're a little bit off with regards to their offensive game, they still do have a rock-solid defense as sort of their backbone.
It may ultimately come down to whether or not Dalton Connect has a great game or not, because he didn't have one against Texas, but I think Tennessee was just clearly superior. They're not probably going to be able to get away with that against Creighton. That's going to be a struggle for them, because Creighton has three guys that can give you 20 on any single night. So even if you shut down one of them, the other two can go off. And then Stephen Ashworth is going to be the X factor, because if he can give you 15-plus points, they're incredibly difficult to beat. But Tennessee's defense is like few Creighton has seen much this season. And if it's a low-scoring game and Dalton Connect can just hit some timely shots in the second half, then they probably will have the edge. But Creighton, almost like Duke, they have talent to be a top team. They just have to be consistent. You saw that against Oregon where, there were times where they probably should have lost and they struggled to contain two guys. If they struggle to contain Connect, then it's probably going to be an exit for them this week.
Yeah, I think that is so big, and Dalton Connect might be the most meaningful player to his respective team. Aside from Zach Edey, I think that we'd be remiss to say anyone is more meaningful to their team than Zach Edey, but that said, he might be one of the biggest X factors in all of these games. And how about if we do take a look at that Purdue versus Gonzaga game, as Tristan Freeman, who does such good work over at Boston Brackets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. And with Purdue, as we know, this has been a team that's fallen short in the NCAA tournament a few times. Now they've gotten to the Sweet 16 for the second time in 3 years. But for Gonzaga, I feel like this is one of the few teams that might be able to match up with Purdue down low, because you mentioned Graham Ike, but also Anton Watson does a relatively solid job on glass. Obviously doesn't have the size of someone like a Zach Edey, but how do you take a look at this matchup? One that involves a Gonzaga team that I feel like is one of the few in the country that can match the strengths of Purdue.
If nothing, Gonzaga has bodies. They have a clear four-man front court rotation. All of them have been effective. They now have a three-big lineup, which is something they didn't do in the first game against Purdue. Ben Gregg has been playing fantastic at the three spot, and Purdue doesn't really have an answer for that. You're probably going to see either Fletcher Lawyer or Lance Jones guard him, and that could be an advantage for Gonzaga. Neither team shot very well in the first game, and I think you're going to see that improve as well, considering how good Purdue is at shooting the ball and how well Gonzaga has shot the ball so far in March. Edey is ultimately going to get his, but if Gonzaga can do a good job eliminating the effectiveness of the guards, then they're going to have a really good shot at winning. And look, you don't want to doubt Mark Few in March, and there's still some questions about Matt Painter. And even though Gonzaga has, the history of 9 straight Sweet 16 appearances, the pressure is going to be on Purdue because it's Final Four bust for them with Edey. And if the game's close, the poised Gonzaga team could possibly find a way to squeak this out.
Yep, and how much do you think the just overall reputation and sometimes the narrative goes too far with Gonzaga? Because you always do hear the fact that people are always like, oh, Gonzaga hasn't won a national title, and I feel like that's a little bit unfair considering the Big Ten, the conference they're going up against here in the NCAA tournament, also hasn't won an NCAA tournament since 2000. The Pac-12 hasn't won one since 1997, and I almost feel like we put a little bit too much on a Gonzaga team that is here in the Sweet 16 for, I believe, the 8th straight NCAA tournament, if not the 9th.
Yeah, I mean, look at the two teams who recently won a national title, Virginia and even Baylor. Now, that those teams have had early exits. People were mentioning, hey, well, outside of them winning a national title, they haven't done much in March. I mean, honestly, no team can say that they have a great resume in March. The top teams have had early exits. The middle teams have had, their exit. So everyone gets that kind of talk when it comes to not succeeding because it's a single elimination tournament. Ultimately, no one wanted to see Gonzaga in their bracket, and that's the true tell of how good a team is, not whether or not they were able to get it done a couple of years ago. So if that's in your mind, then honestly, it shouldn't matter in this matchup because both teams haven't been able to get it done. Quite frankly, none of the teams that are playing can say that they've gotten it done because Duke hasn't done it, in the Shirley Shire era. Tennessee hasn't done it. Creighton hasn't made a Final Four. And even Houston, as much success as they had with Kelvin Sampson, they still haven't made that deep run yet.
Absolutely. And you mentioned two teams that are going to be going at it on Friday in Houston versus Duke. And if you look at recent form, Duke looked much better in their round of 32 game against James Madison than Houston did against Texas A&M. But how much do you make out of what we've seen recently out of these teams versus a full season? Because with Houston, I know that they had to really just get by a Texas A&M team. It was a rough go for them towards the back half of the game, but I was impressed by the fortitude that they showed, and I think that a lot of people don't want to admit this, but it's true. Texas A&M was playing really good basketball going in, and I thought that was a much more dangerous game for Houston than what a lot of people want to give it credit for.
Well, Texas A&M, especially whenever Wade Taylor is having a good game, they had 4 or 5 seat talent. They just had too many losses that put them in 8-9 range, but they obviously played to their potential in that matchup. I didn't think of it too much against Houston because that was a good Texas A&M team. But, considering that they found a way to bounce back in overtime despite giving up that late lead, that actually probably says really good things about them, and they'll certainly be tested if the game against Duke gets down to the wire. They dominated Big 12 play in their first year. They clearly shown that they're a title contender. They're clearly tested enough, but they're going to have to play a full 40 minutes because every team left is capable enough to just making that run now beat you. And if they try against a Duke team who clearly has talent, you might argue maybe has more talent up and down the roster, then they're going to get sent home.
Absolutely. I think that that's going to be such a good matchup. And then we've got one more Sweet 16 game to take a look at in Marquette versus NC State. NC State, the only team outside the top 6 seeds to be able to make it this far. And this is a team that you got to see quite a bit of during the regular season in NC State. Just what have you made out of this run, and what do you think it does say about an ACC that was much maligned during the regular season, and all of a sudden in the last 14 days, they have certainly gotten their flowers?
Depending on who you talk to and their feelings, it's either, hey, March is just a small sample size, versus, well, March is the only time it matters. Who cares what happens in November, December when talking about a league? But NC State has the talent. DJ Burns, obviously the big man that everyone loves. They had a lot of offensive firepower with DJ Horn and Casey Morsell, and considering that Ben Middlebrooks has been playing very well. They had the talent, but for some reason or another, they just had those slides where they just couldn't get out of it. But they obviously had the great momentum from the ACC tournament. They found a way to win in Pittsburgh in the first weekend, and they're good enough. And it'll be an interesting matchup because both Burns and also Iguodaro are bad matchups for each other inside, because Iguodaro is not going to be able to handle Burns one-on-one, and if he gets into foul trouble, it could be a problem. At the same time, there's no way Burns is going to be able to keep up with the smaller big man who can space him out on the floor and is basically pick and roll him to death. So it'll be interesting to see which of them gets the advantage, because that could play a key role in who wins that game.
Yep, that could play a massive role, and we've got 4 tremendous games that are going to be coming up for this Friday, and I know that you, Tristan, are looking forward to all that, as we do have Tristan Freeman, Bustin' Brackets, joining me right here on Coast to Coast Hoops. But Tristan, you're such a hardworking man, and that you're already taking a look at what we're getting in the transfer portal, what we're getting in terms of coaching moves. I'm sure that you'd be in agreement with me. Trying to track every transfer portal move right now would be a defeatist effort with how many guys have entered the last 2 weeks. But what have you made out of the moves that we have been seeing thus far in the anti-air quotes here off-season with some of these teams? And has there been anything that has really stood out in terms of a player going elsewhere and or a coaching hire that we've seen in the last few days?
As far as the portal, not really. We knew that, considering that there's no rules when it comes to restrictions. Anyone with eligibility that isn't, a top guy is probably going to look to see what happens. There's guys entering that'll probably come back, and there will be guys who average 11 points at a decent team that'll just go to another decent team. So I don't really have too much to comment on the portal, especially considering that there's going to be some big names that's going to enter in the next 30 days. So we'll just have to see how that plays out. But just on the coaching side, I think the Louisville hire, as messy as the Payne era was, it remained messy after his firing because it took them a while to find their coach. But they get Pat Kelsey, who had great success at college at Charleston. But you could argue that Charleston was the clear top dog when it came to resources in the CAA. And Louisville obviously has great resources themselves, but he's going to have to compete with the likes of Duke and UNC. And it'll be interesting to see not only what kind of talent he can get, but whether or not he can muster, because there's a lot of solid coaches in this league, and there's a lot of talent.
Yeah, there certainly is a lot of talent, and when it comes to Pat Kelsey, I'm so glad that you brought up his hire, because that's one of the most intriguing ones of the offseason. As we know, College of Charleston, they play a different style than a lot of teams. They have sort of like big-time line shifts. They've got 8 or 9 guys that play a lot of very equal minutes. You don't necessarily have that one dominant scorer, but got sort of the whole is greater than some of its parts approach, for lack of a better term. Do you think that will be able to be duplicated over at Louisville, or do you think he might need to tweak his style a little bit in the ACC?
I think it's going to come down to the player personnel that he gets, because obviously you can try and get guys that fit your system, but you also just need to get guys that you know will commit to you. So I think in the first year it's going to be hard to tell, but just in general, I think he can try. There's no reason why not to. I thought Micah Shrewsbury had some success with the limited roster pieces he had at Notre Dame to sort of try to fit that three-point style, and he has guards to build off of, and we'll see what he can do. But there's no reason why Pat Kelsey can't at least try it.
Yep, absolutely, and good point on Micah Shrewsbury. What he was able to do at Notre Dame was very solid, and I think that is a program that has a lot of upside moving forward, and this podcast always has upside when you're aboard, Tristan. You do amazing work taking a look at this great game that we all know and love of college basketball. As I was alluding to, you're not only doing a great job looking at these games that we're going to get for the rest of the NCAA tournament, but you're doing a great job tracking what is a almost impossible transfer portal to track. I mean, my goodness, all the guys that have entered into the portal, a couple with all these coaching moves as well. So love to get people at home know it's all on tap for you, and how people can follow along on social media and other platforms.
Yeah, you can follow me at Hoopstud351 on Twitter/X. You can also follow at Busted Brackets for the latest college basketball news. And while covering the tournament, we'll be working on a transfer portal as well. Look out for my first top 25 portal commitments from the first 2 weeks of there, because we still got to find a way to keep track of what's going to be a very, very crazy couple of months.
Oh, it is going to be a crazy next few months. We'll be sure to get Tristan on during the offseason, because he does such a great job of being able to parse through what is very, very hard to decipher, to say the least. In college basketball, even though the games are going to be coming to an end in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, the building of rosters for the 2024-25 season has already begun. Tristan has already started his work there, and he does such an amazing job taking a look at the sport. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me on Cuz Hoops, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. And coming up next, it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on all 4 Sweet 16 games for this Friday as we hit some big shots. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Cuz Hoops with myself, Craig Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. It is always great to get Tristan Freeman aboard, who does such good work over at Bustin' Brackets, taking a look at this great game of basketball that we all know and love. Every single time he joins this show, he makes us just a little bit smarter, and he's doing a great job taking a look at not just these Sweet 16 games and where we're going to be getting the rest of the season, but also looking forward to next year, these coaching changes, the transfer portal, and so much more. Really does a great job following this tremendous game of basketball. So big thanks to Tristan for joining me in the last segment. Now it is that time of the podcast to give you picks and analysis on every game on the betting board for this college basketball Friday, this Sweet 16 Friday, as we hit some bank shots.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
Do note that, as per usual, any changes that are made to these plays will be listed up on my Twitter/X feed at June_D1. Got just 4 games today. We're going to be going with the Midwest region games first, and then the South region games. Those are going to be at the bottom, and we do lead things off with my DK Network write-up pick. This is 639, 640 on the card, as Gonzaga and Purdue do battle out there from the great state of Michigan, and Gonzaga is a underdog of 5.5 points. Your total on this game, you're going to be getting it at a 154.5. This is the total I'm going to be willing to take over. I did set my total at 155. You've got 2 teams that have been superb with their offense. You've got a Purdue team that is number 2 in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and Gonzaga has ascended to number 4, but I am going to be writing up Gonzaga getting the 5.5. I don't want to take the money line here, but I think Gonzaga actually matches up relatively well with Purdue. Now, Giant of the Year, Zach Edey is the most valuable player, in my opinion, in all of college basketball as of right now. He's able to give you a double-figure amount of rebounds. He helps this Purdue team just do an amazing job being able to control the glass in general, but I do think that Graham Ike, he'll at the very least be a speed bump. Not that he's going to win the battle down low or anything like that, but you know what? If you're able to be at the very minimum a speed bump to Mr. Zach Edey, the rest of the guys down low for Purdue aren't necessarily that great, and this is a Gonzaga team that does a relatively solid job in terms of their rebound rate, with having Ike along with Anton Watson combining for about 14.5 rebounds per game, while Giant of the Year Zach Edey, he's amazing with his 12 boards, 24.5 points per contest. You've got Braden Smith, who also is a stat sheet sufferer, and you do have to wonder how close to 100% he is. Like, I don't think that he's super banged up or anything like that. I don't think that he's going to be playing at like 50%, but he did suffer that injury in the Big Ten tournament, has not been as assertive of a scorer ever since then. For the season, 12.5 points, 5.5 boards, 7.3 assists per contest, so he's been able to do a solid job there. And the biggest thing for Purdue, and I feel like we lose sight of this Purdue team has been an amazing three-point shooting team. They're actually number 1 in all of college basketball in terms of their three-point shooting percentage. You just take a look at all these guys knocking down threes among their top 8 scorers. Every single one of them shoot at least 34.8% from three-point. All but 2 of them, by the way, shoot north of 44% from the outside, but it's also a Gonzaga team that has been able to shoot it relatively well from 3 themselves. Away from home, they shoot 35.9%, and while you look at that overall percentage for Purdue of 40.9%, what it doesn't take into account is the fact that they shoot 45% from 3 at home. In a road or neutral court setting, this team shoots closer to 37% from 3-point, so it does fall off a little bit. You've got Fletcher Lawyers being able to do a tremendous job in the backcourt, giving you 10.5 points per contest, but how about Ryan Nembhard and the way that he has been so clean and efficient for a Gonzaga team that they allow a full point less per 100 possessions in games played away from home rather than this Purdue team. It is a Purdue team that has been relatively solid at being able to lock down the 3-point arc. It's a Gonzaga team that away from home they allow opponents to shoot in that pocket about 33% from 3-point range, but I do think that with Purdue being able to get Nolan Hickman going, giving you about 14 points per contest, he's helped out being able to give you about a steal per game as well. And Gonzaga just having overall consistency when they leave home. They actually average 2.5 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home than this Purdue team is, and they're actually the better interior defense as well. Purdue, 60th in the country in opponent's 2-point shooting percentage. Gonzaga, they are number 10 with this regard. I think that's going to allow them to hang in there. You don't have quite as much depth with Gonzaga, but Braden Huff, Ben Gregg, these are guys that are giving you 9 to 9.5 points per contest. Especially Gregg has been able to shoot about 38.5% from 3-point range. Has a great name, by the way, and I do think that with Ike, he's going to be able to match up with Zach Edey. Okay, like I said, I don't think that he wins the battle, but I think he does just enough for Gonzaga to hold in there. My write-up here, taking the 5.5 with this Gonzaga Bulldogs team. I think that it's going to be a higher scoring affair. I'm going to be taking a look at the over as well. Semi-total at a 155, so you're at the 154.5. Do like that over. 641, 642 on the betting board. It is Creighton going up against Tennessee. This is also out there in Michigan. Tennessee, a 3-point favorite with a total of 144, and did set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Tennessee. I just feel like with Creighton, if they were to open up a restaurant, they would be charged for copyright because they would have to call it Five Guys. Outside their main starting 5, you don't get a whole heck of a lot of anything as Fran Farabello comes off the bench. He's able to give you a little bit of production, and it is a Creighton team that they truly do live and die by the 3-ball. This bunch, they are 9th in the country in terms of 3-pointers attempted just per game. They take north of 47% of the field goals from 3-point range. Now, you have to absolutely love their top 3. Ryan Kalkbrenner, one of the best rim protectors that you're going to find in college basketball. He's been able to supply the team with a little bit over 3 blocks, 17 points, throws in there about 7.5 rebounds per game. Baylor Shireman does it all, 18 points, 9 boards, 4 assists, shoots 38% from 3-point range, while Trey Alexander shoots more around 33.5% for the outside, but 17.5 points, 5.5 boards per contest. But you just have more overall depth with Tennessee and that lead guy in Dalton Connect, who has been connecting all season long for north of 20 points per contest, while being able to pick it up on defense as well. Sure, this is a Tennessee team that isn't quite the same on defense as they have been in past years, but they're still number 7 in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. A go against a Creighton team that's closer to 66th. Now, I will say for Creighton, they actually allow fewer points per possession in games played away from home rather than at home. But here's the issue that you've got with the Creighton defense. Out of your 362 D1 teams in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, they are a bottom 10 team in all of college basketball. basketball. So I do think that that is going to be a little bit of a worry spot for this team. I do think that for Tennessee, it is going to be very, very important for them to be able to guard the arc, and they haven't been quite the same three-point shooting defense that they have been in past years, and I'll give Creighton a little bit of credit as well. This has been a team that has done a nice job. I'll be able to lock it down from three-point range. Creighton, in terms of opponent's three-point shooting percentage, is 53rd in the country, with opponents shooting about 32.8% from three-point range in games played away from them. Tennessee, meanwhile, they're 29th, with opponents shooting about 33.2% from distance when they are in a roadside stretch court setting. But having someone like a Josiah Jordan-James, who's a nice stat sheet stuffer for this team, he's able to supply you with like 9 points. He's able to give you 5 boards, a block, a steal per contest. Having Jonas Adu doing all that he is doing on the glass, as he's been able to supply the team with about 7.5 rebounds per game. Zakai Ziegler, Santiago Vescovi doing a nice job being able to dole it out. And this Tennessee team just having a little bit of an edge overall on the glass. They are 41st in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. You've got a Creighton team that they've been able to do a rock solid job as well. They're about 34th, but the Tennessee rebounding has been able to travel a little bit more. It's a little bit more dispersed. I do think that Tennessee is able to get the job done, and just think that with their overall depth, they've got more ways to be able to win this game. So I did set my line at 4.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Tennessee. Tennessee, though, they've been amazing on defense. They've also really picked it up on offense, becoming a top 50 offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Here at a 144/144.5, that is my max buy point on the over. It did semi-total 144.5, so wouldn't want to go past or north of 144, but here at the 144, do like it over, and I'm going to be willing to lay with Tennessee. Now we hit the South region. This is going to be 643, 644 on the betting board. NC State and Marquette do battle from Dallas, Texas. It is between 6 and 6.5 that you're going to have to play with Marquette. Total on this game between 151 and 151.5. Did set my line at 8. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Marquette. Marquette, I think, is going to be able to dominate this game with Tyler Kolek just being the number one player in this tournament in assists per game with 7.8. Does a nice job of getting Cam Jones involved, and I think that that's so big. If you take a look at Cam Jones, since the beginning of the month of February, I think that he's played 14 games in total in this span. He's averaging 21.5 points per contest, shooting 49.5% from three-point range on 7 threes per game. That has been absolutely absurd for a Marquette team that it's not like they play as super up-tempo as they did towards the beginning part of the Shaka Smart era. They're about 150th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. NC State is about 152nd, so both of these teams relatively mid-tempo teams, but Marquette, a top 30 team in all of college basketball with regards to turnovers forced on a per-possession basis. They're more around about 61st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and I do think that NC State defense is going to nip them in the bud. They are 163rd in all of college basketball in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and they do give up the arc quite easily, as for NC State, recently they've done a much better job of being able to guard from three-point range in their last 6 games. They're allowing opponents to shoot less than 30% from three-point range, but if you look at the overall season numbers and games played away from them, they're allowing opponents to shoot 35.2% from three-point range, going up against a Marquette team that they themselves are about 156th with this regard, but they allow opponents to shoot closer to about 33.9% from three-point range in games played away from home, and it is an NC State team that, other than DJ Horn, who has been really good for this team, he's shooting north of 40% from three-point range, had his stumbles in that game against Oakland, but all in all has been the top scorer with about 16.5 points per contest. You don't have a lot of consistency from beyond the arc outside that. Jaden Taylor has done a solid job shooting about 36.5% from three-point range. He's been able to supply the team with about 11.5 points per contest. Obviously, DJ Burns has been rock solid with about 13 points per game, but for DJ Burns, even though he is a big guy, figuratively and literally, well, he gives you 4.1 rebounds per game. Mohamed Diarra is the only guy on the roster that gives you north of 4.5 rebounds per game, and that's a big issue because with Marquette, their biggest kryptonite and the way that you're able to hurt them the most is by being able to glass. Marquette is outside the top 250 with regards to rebound rate. NC State is outside the top 175 as well, with Oso Ogudero being able to give you some plus rebounds per game, being able to do all that he does down low. That'll allow Marquette to be able to stalemate down low with them doing such a good job of taking care of the ball. It's really both of these teams. Top 50 teams in all of college basketball in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. NC State actually top 20 with this regard, but also an NC State team not forcing the same amount of turnovers as Marquette. I do think that Marquette going to be able to overwhelm them, get the job done. Did semi-total 150, like I said. Both of these teams relatively mid-tempo. I do think that both of these teams do just enough to guard, especially on the inside, to be able to keep this total under. So do like the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay it with Marquette, set them as an 8-point favorite, and we're going to have things up with 645, 646 on the card. Houston, they play against Duke out there in the great state of Texas. Houston is a favorite of 4 points. Totals anywhere between 134, and I'm seeing a 134.5 out there as well. And I'll be taking a look at the under, semi-total 133.5. I don't want to overreact to what we saw last from Houston. That was a game that they were taking overtime against Texas A&M but that Texas A&M team was not playing like an 8 or a 9 seed. They were playing much better than that, and this is still a Houston team, despite that fumble. If you take a look at them in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, number 1 team in all of college basketball. Now, we do have to give some credit where credit is due to Duke as well. They're not quite number 1 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but under John Shire, they've been a relatively solid defense. They check in more around 33rd in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Kyle Filipowski is going to be a very hard guard moving forward. He's able to give you 17 plus points. Does a solid job giving the team about 7 boards per contest, and it's a Duke team that's in the top 30 nationally in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, going up against a Houston team that is a top 5 team nationally in terms of turnovers forced on a per possession basis, while Houston does a really good job of being able to maintain the ball as well. This is not a Houston team that's like beastly with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage or anything like that, but big reason why they have actually been number 27 in all of college basketball in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They just take care of the ball. Jamal Shedd is able to give you 12 plus points per contest. Doles off 5 assists. Throws in there north of 2.5 steals per contest. You've got LJ Cryer, who does an amazing job, shooting about 38.5% from 3-point range. But then it's guys that are able to chip in, like Jawan Roberts, being able to give you those 7 rebounds per game for a bunch that is one of the best rebound rate teams in all of college basketball. Houston, time and time again, they find a way to be able to win the battle on the boards. 57th in all of college basketball in terms of their rebound rate. Duke, they are checking in more in the neighborhood, about 25th in all of college basketball. And to their credit, their rebounding has been able to travel. Mark Mitchell has been able to give you 6 plus rebounds per game. You've got Jeremy Roach shooting north of 40% from 3-point range. Question becomes, can Houston be able to guard the 3-point arc in this game? They overall are allowing opponents to shoot 30% from distance. That is number 10 in all of college basketball. Duke, meanwhile, in a roadside switch court setting, they do allow opponents to shoot about 33% from 3-point range. I do think that Houston's just overall physicality going to be able to take it to Duke in this spot. I do think that Houston and their ability to take care of the ball, top 25 team, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, going to loom very largely in this game as well. So, circumstance where I'm going to be willing to lay with Houston, set them as a 5.5 point favorite, and here out of 133.5, looking at the under. Duke right around about 200th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Houston, bottom 40 team with that regard, and that'll wrap things up for the Friday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, now part of the VSiN family of podcasts. Big thanks to Tristan Freeman over at Bustin' Brackets for joining me in last segment. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of 2 ways to be able to further this in. First one is my Twitter /X timeline at Gden_D1. Keep in mind, letters CM, name does not matter, so as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. Other ways, find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated from there. You're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, coming at you guys every single day throughout the college basketball season, and that means I'm coming at you once again tomorrow. Thank you so much for tuning in.
If you work in quality control at a candy factory, you know strict safety regulations come with the job. It's why you partner with Grainger. Grainger helps you find the high quality and compliant products your business needs to inspect, detect, and help correct issues. And the sweetest part is, everyone gets a product that's as safe to eat as it is delicious. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.